In the vast and complex landscape of geriatric health, few medical events carry the catastrophic weight of a stroke. For the aging population, particularly those navigating the delicate years beyond 60, the threat of cerebrovascular accidents looms as a silent, pervasive shadow, often striking without warning and leaving a trail of irreversible neurological deficit or mortality. While modern medicine has advanced significantly in acute stroke management, the holy grail of geriatric care remains prevention, the ability to fortify the body's vascular infrastructure against the catastrophic failure of blood flow to the brain. In this pursuit of preventative strategies, nutritional science has increasingly turned its gaze back to ancient wisdom, specifically to the cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, extra virgin olive oil, EVO. This is not merely a culinary ingredient. When viewed through the lens of biochemistry and vascular physiology, extra virgin olive oil emerges as a potent pharmacological agent, a superfood in the truest scientific sense, possessing the capacity to alter the very trajectory of vascular aging. To understand why this golden liquid is critical for preventing stroke in the elderly, we must move beyond simplistic nutritional advice and delve into the molecular mechanisms that govern arterial health, inflammation, and hemodynamic stability. The story of stroke prevention begins with understanding the environment within the blood vessels themselves. As we age, the vascular system undergoes a process of stiffening and degradation, a phenomenon known as arteriosclerosis. The intricate network of arteries that feed the brain, including the carotid and vertebral arteries, loses its elasticity. This natural aging process is exacerbated by the accumulation of oxidative stress and chronic low-grade inflammation, creating a fertile ground for the formation of atherosclerotic plaques. These plaques, composed of lipids, cholesterol, calcium, and cellular debris, narrow the vessel lumen and disturb the laminar flow of blood. It is here, at the very interface of the blood and the vessel wall, that extra virgin olive oil performs its first and perhaps most vital function. Unlike refined oils, which are stripped of their bioactive compounds, EVO is mechanically extracted without heat or chemicals, preserving a rich concentration of polyphenol, most notably oleocanthal, oleuropein, and hydroxytyrosol. These phenolic compounds are not mere antioxidants in the general sense. They're specific, targeted modulators of vascular biology. When an elderly individual consumes EVO, these polyphenol enter the bloodstream and interact directly with the endothelium, the single layer of cells lining the interior of blood vessels. The endothelium is the master regulator of vascular health, and its dysfunction is the primary precursor to ischemic stroke. In the aging body, endothelial cells often struggle to produce sufficient nitric oxide, a critical signaling molecule responsible for vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels to accommodate blood flow and reduce pressure. Research indicates that the polyphenol found in high-quality extra virgin olive oil stimulate the upregulation of endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS, the enzyme responsible for generating nitric oxide. This mechanism is profound. By enhancing the bioavailability of nitric oxide, EVO effectively encourages the stiffened arteries of an older adult to relax and dilate. This restoration of vascular flexibility directly combats hypertension, which is universally recognized as the single most significant modifiable risk factor for stroke. High blood pressure exerts relentless mechanical stress on the cerebral arterial walls, causing micro-tears that the body attempts to repair with plaque. By modulating blood pressure through endothelial support, EVO disrupts the cycle of damage before it can escalate into a catastrophic event. Furthermore, we must consider the specific nature of the blockage that causes an ischemic stroke. Most strokes are caused by a thrombus, clot, or an embolus that lodges in a cerebral artery, starving brain tissue of oxygen. The genesis of these clots is often linked to the instability of atherosclerotic plaques. A stable plaque might restrict blood flow, but an unstable plaque is a ticking time bomb, prone to rupture, which triggers an immediate and massive clotting response. The oleic acid, a monounsaturated fatty acid that constitutes the majority of EVO's lipid profile, works in tandem with polyphenol to alter the chemical composition of these plaques. Scientific literature suggests that regular consumption of monounsaturated fats renders the lipid membrane of cells more fluid and resistant to oxidation. More critically, EVO has been shown to inhibit the oxidation of low-density lipoprotein, LDL cholesterol. It is essential to clarify for our audience that LDL cholesterol itself is not the sole villain. It becomes truly atherogenic only when it oxidizes. Oxidized LDL is toxic to the vascular wall, triggering an immune response that recruits macrophages, which then engorge themselves on lipids and die, forming the necrotic core of a plaque. The hydroxytyrosol in EVO is one of the most potent natural scavengers of free radicals known to science, intercepting the oxidation process of LDL. By preventing LDL oxidation, EVO effectively pacifies the plaque, maintaining it in a more stable state and significantly reducing the risk of rupture that would lead to an acute stroke. Beyond the structural integrity of the arteries, we must look at the blood itself, the fluid dynamics or rheology that dictates how easily blood travels through the narrowing vessels of an aging brain. Viscosity, or the thickness of the blood, plays a crucial role in stroke risk. In elderly individuals, blood platelets often become hyperreactive, meaning they are more prone to clumping together inappropriately. This stickiness increases the likelihood of thrombus formation. Here, the pharmacological profile of oleocanthal mimics the mechanism of action of ibuprofen, a nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug. NSAID. Oleocanthal inhibits the cyclooxygenase, COX, enzymes, which are involved in the inflammatory pathways that lead to platelet aggregation. However, unlike synthetic NSAIDs, which can have adverse effects on the gastric lining and kidney function in seniors, oleocanthal offers a natural, milder, and sustainable antiplatelet effect. This natural blood-thinning property is subtle yet significant over time, ensuring that blood maintains an optimal flow rate through the intricate microvasculature of the brain without significantly increasing the risk of hemorrhagic complications, a balance that is often difficult to achieve with pharmaceutical anticoagulants. The implications of this extend into the realm of metabolic health, which is inextricably linked to stroke risk. Many seniors suffer from metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions including increased blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess body fat around the waist, and abnormal cholesterol or triglyceride levels. This syndrome doubles the risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke. Extra virgin olive oil acts as a metabolic modulator. Unlike saturated fats found in animal products or trans fats found in processed foods, which induce insulin resistance, the monounsaturated fats in EVO improve insulin sensitivity. This is critical because insulin resistance leads to chronic hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. High glucose levels in the blood act like shards of glass within the vascular system, damaging the glycocalyx, the protective coating of the endothelial cells. By improving the cell's ability to respond to insulin and regulating blood glucose spikes after meals, EVO protects the cerebral vessel from the glycotoxic damage that precedes stroke. This is particularly relevant for elderly patients with type 2 diabetes, a demographic with a disproportionately high incidence of stroke. The integration of EVO into the diet effectively dampens the postprandial glucose surge, thereby reducing the sheer oxidative burden placed on the aging brain's vascular network several times a day. Moreover, the narrative of stroke prevention cannot be complete without addressing the chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation often referred to as inflammaging. As the body ages, the immune system becomes dysregulated, leading to a persistent state of alertness that releases pro-inflammatory cytokines such as interleukin-6, IL-6, and C-reactive protein, CRP. Elevated levels of CRP are a strong predictor of future cardiovascular events, including stroke. This chronic inflammation compromises the blood-brain barrier and destabilizes vascular walls. The polyphenol in EVO have been demonstrated in numerous clinical trials to significantly lower serum concentrations of these inflammatory markers. By downregulating the expression of pro-inflammatory genes and inhibiting the nuclear factor kappa B, NF-kappa B, Pathway. A major regulator of inflammation, EVO acts as a systemic fire extinguisher. It cools the inflammatory heat within the circulatory system, allowing the vascular endothelium to heal and function optimally. It is also fascinating to consider the genetic modulation potential of extra virgin olive oil, a field known as nutrigenomics. Emerging research suggests that the bioactive components of EVO may actually influence the expression of genes related to longevity and vascular defense. For instance, the consumption of olive oil has been linked to the protection of telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes. Shortened telomeres are a hallmark of biological aging and are associated with a higher risk of age-related diseases, including stroke. By preserving telomere length in leukocytes, EVO essentially slows the biological clock of the cardiovascular system. As we synthesize these physiological mechanisms, a clear picture emerges. The first major benefit of extra virgin olive oil for seniors is the comprehensive stabilization of hemodynamic function. It is not one single action, but a symphony of biological responses. The relaxation of arterial walls via nitric oxide, the prevention of LDL oxidation, the reduction of platelet aggregation, the improvement of insulin sensitivity, and the suppression of systemic inflammation. However, the protective scope of extra virgin olive oil extends beyond the mechanics of blood flow and plaque stability. As we move deeper into this exploration, we must consider the brain itself, the target organ we're trying to protect. This leads us to explore the neuroprotective properties that make this superfood indispensable for the senior population. Having established the profound impact of extra virgin olive oil on the vascular highways that transport life to the brain, we must now turn our attention to the destination itself, the cerebral terrain. The brain is an incredibly voracious organ, consuming roughly 20% of the body's total oxygen supply despite accounting for only 2% of its weight. This immense metabolic demand makes the aging brain uniquely vulnerable to oxidative stress, a condition that intensifies the risk of stroke and exacerbates the damage should an ischemic event occur. When we discuss stroke prevention in the elderly, we're not merely talking about plumbing, keeping the pipes clear. We are talking about resilience. We are discussing the capacity of neurons to withstand stress, to maintain energy production, and to survive in conditions of reduced resources. The biochemistry of the aging brain is characterized by a gradual decline in mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the power plants of our cells, generating the adenosine triphosphate, ADP, necessary for every thought, movement, and regulatory signal. In elderly individuals, mitochondrial efficiency wanes, leading to a leakage of free radicals that damage cellular structures. This mitochondrial dysfunction is a critical vulnerability. If blood flow is momentarily restricted, as happens in a transient ischemic attack, TI, or mini-stroke, neurons with weak mitochondria die almost instantly. However, neurons fortified by the bioactive components of extra virgin olive oil display a remarkable robustness. Research has identified that hydroxytyrosol and oleuropein, the primary phenolic compounds in EVO, act as potent mitochondrial nutrients. They do not simply scavenge the free radicals that leak from these aging engines. They actually stimulate a process known as mitochondrial biogenesis. This means the consumption of EVO encourages brain cells to create new, more efficient mitochondria. For a senior citizen, this translates to a higher energy reserve within their brain cells. If a stroke were to occur, causing a drop in oxygen and glucose, neurons with a higher mitochondrial density and efficiency have a significantly better chance of survival, potentially turning what could have been a debilitating stroke into a manageable, minor event or preventing the tissue death entirely. This neuroprotective narrative deepens when we consider the connection between stroke and neurodegeneration. In the geriatric population, stroke and conditions like Alzheimer's disease are often intertwined. A history of stroke doubles the risk of developing dementia, and conversely, the neurodegenerative processes of dementia weaken the brain's vasculature, inviting stroke. Extra virgin olive oil intervenes in this vicious cycle through the promotion of autophagy. Autophagy is the body's internal housekeeping mechanism, a cellular recycling system where cells identify, degrade, and remove damaged proteins and organelles. As we age, this cleaning mechanism becomes sluggish, allowing toxic debris, such as beta-amyloid plaques and tau tangles, to accumulate. These accumulations are toxic to neurons and inflammatory to the surrounding blood vessels. The polyphenol in EVO, specifically oleocanthal, have been shown to upregulate the expression of enzymes that facilitate autophagy. By keeping the neural environment clean and free of toxic protein aggregates, EVO preserves the structural integrity of the brain tissue. This is crucial for stroke prevention because a brain burdened by neurotoxic waste is a brain in a state of chronic inflammation, making its vasculature fragile and prone to rupture or blockage. Furthermore, we must address the concept of synaptic plasticity and neurotrophic support. For years, it was believed that the aging brain could not generate new neurons or forge new connections. We now know this to be false, provided the chemical environment is right. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, is a protein that acts like a fertilizer for the brain, encouraging the growth of new neurons and the strengthening of existing synapses. Low levels of BDNF are consistently associated with an increased risk of stroke and poor recovery outcomes. The aging process naturally depletes BDNF levels, leading to cognitive rigidity and fragility. Dietary intervention with extra virgin olive oil has been demonstrated to reverse this trend, elevating levels of BDNF in the hippocampus and cortex. This upregulation serves a dual purpose. It combats the cognitive decline associated with aging. And more importantly for our topic, it creates a neural reserve. A brain with high synaptic plasticity is like a city with many detour routes. If one pathway is blocked by a small stroke, the brain can rapidly reroute signals, masking the symptoms and maintaining function. However, the influence of extra virgin olive oil on stroke risk is not confined to the cranial cavity. It extends downwards to the enteric nervous system, often called the second brain, the gut. The gut-brain axis is one of the most exciting frontiers in modern medical science, and its relevance to stroke prevention is profound. The microbiome of an elderly individual often shifts towards a profile of dysbiosis, an imbalance of gut bacteria that favors pro-inflammatory species. One of the most dangerous byproducts of this dysbiosis is a compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, TMO. When we consume choline and carnitine, found in red meat and eggs, certain gut bacteria convert them into TMA, which the liver then oxidizes into TMAO. High levels of circulating TMAO are a potent predictor of stroke, even more accurate than cholesterol in some models. TMAO inhibits the reverse cholesterol transport system and promotes platelet hyperreactivity, essentially setting the stage for clot formation. Extra virgin olive oil acts as a powerful prebiotic that modulates the gut microbiome. It encourages the growth of beneficial bacteria, like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, while inhibiting the strains responsible for TMA production. By reshaping the microbial landscape of the gut, EVO effectively lowers plasma TMAO levels. This is a systemic intervention where a dietary change in the stomach reduces the clotting risk in the brain. Let us also reconsider the lipid profile, but with a more nuanced perspective than simply lowering bad cholesterol. In the context of stroke prevention for seniors, the functionality of high-density lipoprotein, HDL, is far more important than its mere concentration. HDL is often termed good cholesterol, acting as a scavenger that removes excess cholesterol from arterial walls and transports it to the liver for excretion. However, in an inflammatory environment common in aging, HDL can become dysfunctional or pro-inflammatory, losing its ability to transport lipids and even contributing to oxidation. This renders the good cholesterol ineffective. Extra virgin olive oil is unique in its ability to restore the functionality of HDL particles. The polyphenol bind to the HDL particle, protecting it from oxidation and enhancing its capacity for cholesterol efflux. This means that for a senior consuming EVO, their HDL becomes a more efficient cleaning crew, aggressively scrubbing the vessel walls of lipid deposits. Moreover, we must explore the role of EVO in regulating blood sugar variability, specifically in relation to the dawn phenomenon and nocturnal spikes. Many elderly individuals experience dysregulation of glucose metabolism, even if they are not fully diabetic. Fluctuating blood sugar levels damage the endothelial lining of the cerebral microvasculature, leading to small vessel disease, a primary cause of lacunar strokes and white matter lesions. The monounsaturated fats in EVO, when consumed as part of the daily diet, slow gastric emptying and modify the absorption of carbohydrates. This leads to a flattening of the glucose curve by preventing the sharp spikes and troughs in blood sugar. EVO protects the microvessels of the brain from glycotoxic stress. In addition to these biochemical mechanisms, we must consider the genetic modulation of longevity pathways, specifically the activation of the NRF2 pathway. NRF2 is a transcription factor that regulates the expression of antioxidant proteins that protect against oxidative damage triggered by injury and inflammation. It is often described as the master switch of cellular detoxification. Compounds in extra virgin olive oil, particularly oleocanthal, act as mild stressors that nudge the NRF2 pathway back into action. By constantly keeping this defense system primed, EVO ensures that if a cerebral vessel is compromised, the surrounding brain cells are ready to deploy a massive antioxidant defense to limit the spread of injury. Another often overlooked aspect of stroke prevention in the elderly is the management of atrial fibrillation, AFib. AFib is an irregular heart rhythm that is a leading cause of stroke in older adults. While EVO cannot cure the electrical abnormalities of the heart, its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects play a role in preventing the structural remodeling of the heart tissue, fibrosis, that leads to AFib. Finally, within this section on neuroprotection and systemic resilience, we must touch upon the psychological aspect of consumption. The sensory experience of consuming high-quality extra virgin olive oil, its aroma, its flavor, activates the cephalic phase of digestion and stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the primary component of the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for the rest and digest state. Activation of the vagus nerve has direct anti-inflammatory effects and lowers heart rate and blood pressure. As we conclude this examination of the neural and systemic defenses, we see that extra virgin olive oil operates as a grand orchestrator of resilience. But beyond the biochemistry, we must now turn our attention to the practical application. How to select, store, and integrate this superfood into the daily life of an older adult to maximize these specific biological benefits. We have journeyed through the microscopic landscapes of the arteries and the intricate neural networks of the brain, uncovering the profound biological mechanisms by which extra virgin olive oil, EVO, defends the aging body against stroke. However, scientific understanding, no matter how detailed, remains theoretical until it is applied. As we transition from the laboratory to the kitchen, we face the practical reality of integrating this superfood into the daily life of a senior. This is not as simple as buying any bottle-labeled olive oil from the supermarket shelf. The world of olive oil is fraught with variability, misinformation, and quality disparity. For the elderly individual seeking stroke prevention, the selection of the oil is as critical as the consumption itself, for the therapeutic value lies entirely in the concentration of the bioactive compounds we have discussed. If the polyphenol are absent due to poor processing or age, the oil is merely a source of calories, stripped of its neuroprotective and vasculoprotective powers. Therefore, the final phase of our exploration must be a guide to discerning quality, understanding culinary usage, and mastering the daily protocol for maximum health span. The first challenge is the label. Extra virgin is a specific chemical and organoleptic standard, dictating that the oil must be extracted solely by mechanical means, without heat or chemical solvents, and must have a free acidity of less than 0.8%. However, for stroke prevention, we must aim higher than the minimum standard. The magic lies in the polyphenol count. When selecting an oil, one must look for harvest dates, not just expiration dates. Olive oil is a fruit juice, not a fine wine. It does not improve with age. It is most potent immediately after pressing. Over time, the volatile phenolic compounds, the very agents that scrub the arteries and protect the brain, degrade. Furthermore, the true test of a stroke-preventing oil is sensory. When tasted neat, a high-quality EVO should elicit a distinct peppery burn or catch at the back of the throat. This sensation, often mistaken by the uninitiated as a sign of rancidity or high acidity, is actually the physiological sign of oleocanthal. That cough-inducing sting is the flavor of anti-inflammatory potency. It is the direct sensory evidence that the oil contains the medicine capable of inhibiting platelet aggregation and reducing vascular inflammation. For the elderly consumer, learning to seek out this bitter is better profile is a crucial shift in perspective. Once the correct oil is secured, we must address one of the most persistent and damaging myths in nutritional science: the belief that you cannot cook with extra virgin olive oil. For decades, seniors have been advised to reserve EVO for salads and to use refined vegetable oils for cooking, under the mistaken notion that olive oil has a low smoke point and becomes toxic when heated. This advice is not only scientifically flawed, but potentially harmful. While it is true that EVO has a lower smoke point than chemically refined oils, it is high enough for almost all domestic cooking, including sautéing and pan-frying. More importantly, the stability of an oil under heat is not determined solely by its smoke point, but by its oxidative stability. Thanks to its high content of stable monounsaturated fats and the protective shield of its antioxidants, EVO is incredibly resistant to breaking down into toxic aldehydes and lipid peroxides when heated. In fact, cooking vegetables in EVO enhances the nutritional value of the meal. The lipids in the oil act as a solvent for fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and carotenoids found in vegetables, increasing their bioavailability. However, even the finest oil can be rendered useless by improper storage, a factor often overlooked in geriatric households. The enemies of extra virgin olive oil are the 3 O's: oxygen, optical radiation, light, and overheating. The bioactive polyphenol are photosensitive and easily oxidized. Storing oil in a clear glass bottle on a windowsill or right next to the stove is a prescription for degradation. Within weeks, in such conditions, the oil can become rancid. The protocol for the elderly is clear: buy oil in dark glass or tin containers that block light. Store it in a cool, dark cupboard away from heat sources. Furthermore, once a bottle is opened, the clock starts ticking. It is far better to buy smaller bottles that are consumed quickly, ensuring a fresh supply of polyphenol, than to buy a large, economy-sized jug that sits open for months, slowly turning into a pro-inflammatory substance. Now, we must quantify the intervention. What is the dosage for stroke prevention? The scientific consensus suggests a daily intake of approximately 2 to 4 tablespoons, about 30 to 60 milliliters. This amount has been shown to provide the critical mass of phenols needed to exert measurable changes in blood pressure, endothelial function, and inflammatory markers. It is important to frame this not as adding calories, but as replacing less healthy fats. As we synthesize the vast amount of information covered in this trilogy, we can crystallize the 7 benefits that make extra virgin olive oil a superfood for stroke prevention in the elderly. First, it is a hemodynamic modulator. Second, it acts as a plaque stabilizer. Third, it is a natural antiplatelet agent. Fourth, it serves as a metabolic regulator. Fifth, it is a potent neuroprotector. Sixth, it functions as a systemic anti-inflammatory. And seventh, it is a microbiome restorer. These 7 pillars form a comprehensive defense strategy. But beyond the biochemistry, there is a profound message here for the aging population. The fear of stroke is often a fear of loss. Loss of mobility, loss of independence, loss of self. However, the science of extra virgin olive oil rewrites this script. It places the power of intervention back into the hands of the individual. By embracing this liquid gold, by understanding its mechanisms, and by respecting its quality and usage, you are building a shield against one of the most devastating threats to your golden years. This is not just food. It is the fuel for a life lived fully, right to the very end.